you don't have a money problem. You have a philosophy problem. Because if money controls your decisions, your emotions, your self-worth, then it doesn't matter how much you earn. You're not free. You're just another well-dressed slave. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. They didn't worship money. They mastered it. They knew money is a tool, not a god. And unless you train your mind, it will rule your life. This video isn't about getting rich. It's about taking back control. He understood that real power wasn't in having more. It was in being able to walk away from more and still feel whole. To practice this, you don't need to become an ascetic. You don't need to reject all comfort. Not because they enjoy the labor, not because the work aligns with their nature, but because they have built a lifestyle that demands constant payment. So they become prisoners of their own ambitions, slaves to the systems they created. But if money is your servant, you choose when and how to use it. You make decisions based on principle, not pressure. You pursue projects because they fulfill your purpose, not just your paycheck. You say no when the offer compromises your integrity, even if it's lucrative, because your soul is not for sale. Let's take a look at how this manifests in everyday life. You stay in a job you hate year after year because the salary is too good to walk away from. You say yes to unethical partnerships because it's business. You work endless hours, destroying your health and your relationships because the next bonus will make it worth it. But the Stoic leans back, watches the rush, and whispers, "At what cost?" Seneca reminds us, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. And the craving for more is the chain that turns money into a master. Once you believe that a higher number in your account will finally silence the restlessness, you are trapped, because that number will always move. The bar will always rise. The hunger will always return. Freedom begins not when you earn enough, but when you realize enough is a decision, not a destination. So how do you reclaim your authority over money? Start by re-establishing the hierarchy. You are the sovereign. Money is the instrument. If your lifestyle has made you its prisoner, begin simplifying. Detach your identity from your income. Remind yourself daily, money is useful, but I am complete without it. Second, be clear about what you will and will not do for money. Set internal boundaries. I will not lie for money. I will not harm others for money. I will not spend time on meaningless work for money. I will not lose sleep, lose family, or lose self for money. These are not just rules. They are lines that protect your soul from erosion. Third, practice gratitude, not as a feel-good exercise, but as a weapon against greed. Every time you thank life for what you have, you remind money. I don't need more of you to be content. And money, like any servant, behaves best when it is not worshipped. Money is a servant with great utility. It can build homes, fund dreams, feed families, but it has no heart, no wisdom, no conscience. It is only as noble or corrupt as the hand that holds it. The Stoic aims not to gather wealth, but to wield it wisely. When you stop fearing money, stop craving money, stop centering your life around money, you finally learn to use it. You give freely, you spend consciously, you save without obsession, and most of all, you walk through the world unchained, not indifferent to fortune, but independent of it. Because true power is this: to have money and not need it, to lose money and not lose yourself, to walk away from money and still feel rich. That is Stoic strength. That is the authority of the man who remembers, money works for me, I do not work for money. 11. Live below your means, not at the edge of them. The Stoic path to financial calm and true autonomy. There is a quiet kind of desperation that lives in many people today. They earn more than ever. Their bank accounts look fuller. Their homes are bigger. Their phones newer. Their meals more expensive. And yet, they are anxious. They are always waiting for the next paycheck, always calculating, always treading water. Why? Because they live exactly at the limit of what they make, or just above it. There is no margin, no room for error, no peace. The Stoic sees this as madness, not because prosperity is wrong, but because a life lived at the edge is a life lived in fear, and fear is incompatible with freedom. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor of one of the most powerful empires in history, reminded himself constantly, the things you think you need to live well, you don't need them. That wasn't a rejection of wealth, it was a commandment of balance, a warning against the trap of expanding lifestyle every time your income increases, a reminder that if you always spend as much as you earn, no matter how much you earn, you will always be vulnerable. The Stoic doesn't seek just wealth, he seeks margin. Margin means breathing room. It means space between what you need and what you spend. It means building a life not to impress others, but to protect your inner equilibrium. You just need to ask, every time you feel that craving to buy something or chase more, do I truly need this? Will this bring me closer to inner peace or distract me from it? Is this a want I've created or a real need that serves my purpose? Most of the time, you'll find the desires coming from ego, from social comparison, from boredom, but the Stoic doesn't obey those voices. The Stoic observes them, detaches, and reclaims control. When you live below your means, you gain something that no salary can buy. Calm. You know you can weather storms. You know a missed payment won't break you. You know you are not constantly one emergency away from collapse. And in that knowledge, you become powerful, not because of what you have, but because of what you can do without. Contrast that with the average lifestyle today. Someone gets a raise and immediately upgrades their car. They get a bonus and upgrade their wardrobe. Their salary goes up, but so does their rent, their vacations, their social expectations. And slowly, quietly, they become dependent not just on their income, but on the image their spending sustains. They aren't working to grow, they're working to maintain. And maintaining requires constant motion, constant stress, constant fear of interruption. But the Stoic refuses to live this way. He does not race to spend more when he earns more. He does not see higher income as permission for higher expenses. Instead, he sees it as an opportunity to save, to simplify, to build stability, to invest in things that outlast trends. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." And what do we crave when we live at the edge? More stimulation, more attention, more validation, but never more peace. Because peace doesn't come from having more, it comes from needing less. Living below your means is not deprivation, it's declaration. It says, I value calm over consumption. I choose sustainability over spectacle. I would rather sleep well than show off. It's a mindset, not a sacrifice. It's not about saying no to joy. It's about saying no to compulsion. It's about understanding that joy is not found in spending recklessly, but in spending consciously, in knowing that the simplest meal tastes better when it's not followed by regret. How do you start? First, know your numbers. Not to become obsessed, but to become aware. If you don't know where your money goes, your money controls you. Track your spending, not forever, but long enough to face the truth. Second, define your enough. What lifestyle brings you peace, not pressure? What are your true needs, and what are inherited cravings from society, social media, or marketing? Third, choose habits that honor your values. Prepare your own food more often, and cancel what doesn't serve you. Downsize without shame. Simplify not because you have to, but because you can. When you start living below your means, you discover something radical. You already have more than enough. you begin to notice that time feels slower, decisions feel clearer, stress starts to dissolve, because you're no longer dancing on the edge of financial ruin. You're standing firmly on the ground of conscious choice, and that ground is solid, reliable, quiet. The Stoic does not fear the future, because he prepares for it today. He does not resent the rich, because he understands that true wealth is not excess, but resilience. And he does not pity the simple, because simplicity, when chosen, is the ultimate luxury. So when the world tells you to spend more, show more, flaunt more, the Stoic smiles and steps back, because he knows freedom is not living large, freedom is living light. 12. You are only truly rich if you can lose it all and still remain yourself. The final test of inner wealth. What if you lost everything? Your income, your home, your savings, the comfort, the habits, the familiar routines. What would remain? Would you still stand with calm shoulders? Would you still speak with clarity? Would you still know who you are? For the Stoics, this is the ultimate test. Not how much you own, but how much you can lose without losing yourself. Seneca once said, "He is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware." Why? Because it's never about the object. It's always about the soul. A Stoic doesn't cling. He appreciates without attachment. He builds without fear. He lives with strength that is internal, not circumstantial. And in that strength lies a kind of wealth that cannot be taxed, stolen, frozen, or devalued. The modern world worships accumulation. We measure success in possessions, digits, square footage. We strive to insulate ourselves from loss with insurance, savings, and assets. And while prudence is not unstoic, dependence is. Because when you depend on what you have to feel secure, you've already lost control. You've already handed your peace to something outside of you. The Stoic trains for the opposite, not to avoid loss, but to transcend it. You also begin to see that simplicity is not limitation, it's clarity. When you simplify, your finances get clearer, your mind gets sharper, and your path becomes more focused. Every item you own, every expense you carry, is something you have to manage, maintain, and mentally account for. But the less you need, the lighter you move. Minimalism is not about scarcity, it's about sovereignty. And this is why how little you need becomes a measure of greatness in Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, surrounded by unimaginable riches and power, wrote daily reminders to himself about death, impermanence, and the vanity of possessions. Why? Because he understood, the more you have, the more you risk forgetting what really matters. And when you forget that, loss becomes terrifying. But when you remember it, loss becomes liberation. Ask yourself this: if tomorrow everything were taken from me, what part of me would remain untouched? That is the measure of true wealth. It's not about renouncing all possessions. It's about building an identity so deeply rooted in virtue, courage, patience, discipline, wisdom, that when the wind blows, nothing essential is moved. You are not defined by your car, your job title, your lifestyle. You are defined by your ability to remain unchanged in a changing world. The Stoics called this stability ataraxia, a state of inner tranquility unshaken by fortune or misfortune. It doesn't mean emotionless. It means grounded. It means the kind of strength that, when the fire comes, doesn't scream, but breathes, rebuilds, endures. And this kind of strength is earned. It's cultivated through practice, through presence, through preparing your mind daily to return to what cannot be lost. Here's a radical exercise. Imagine it's all gone, not to create anxiety, but to sharpen perspective. If your money vanished, could you still find meaning in a sunrise? If your job disappeared, would you still treat people with kindness? If your luxuries were stripped away, Would your values remain intact? Because that's the Stoic goal. Not to possess forever, but to walk through this life so well practiced in simplicity, in virtue, in clarity, that when life removes the extras, you still stand whole. You don't need everything to go right to live well. You need to know that even when everything goes wrong, you are still you. And the only way to reach that kind of confidence is through philosophical discipline. Live simply, love fully, detach wisely, train often. Because the richest man is not the one who has the most. He's the one who can lose it all and still look in the mirror without shame. That is freedom. That is power. That is Stoicism. The fewer things you require to feel full, the more you're in command of your life. Epictetus taught his students to imagine losing everything, possessions, wealth, status, and still being able to say, I remain myself. That is true power. So if you want to build real wealth, Stoic wealth, start here. Not with more income, not with better investments, not with a raise or promotion. Start by lowering your threshold for satisfaction. Practice wanting less. And in doing so, you'll discover that what you already have is more than enough. And that, perhaps for the first time, you are truly rich. 2. Distinguish value from price. A Stoic lesson in seeing through the illusion. What is the value of a thing? In our modern world, price is often mistaken for value. We're taught that something is important because it costs a lot. That the higher the price tag, the more worthy the object, the more desirable it must be. But the Stoics would tell you, price is what others are willing to pay. Value is what it brings to your soul. And those two are not the same. The Stoic separates value from illusion. He asks not, what does this cost? But, what is this worth to my life? Does it bring clarity or confusion? Does it enhance virtue or inflate ego? Does it contribute to your freedom or add another layer of slavery? Seneca warned us, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. Let that sink in. Craving, chasing, comparing. These are the true bankruptcies of the soul. A person can live surrounded by luxury and still be impoverished inside if he doesn't know what truly matters. That's why the Stoic doesn't care if your shoes are from a designer label. He asks, instead, can you walk with integrity? He doesn't care if your watch is made of gold. He asks, how do you spend your time? He doesn't measure you by your car, but by your direction. Because appearance is cheap, character is costly. Let's apply this to how we live and spend. You may be tempted to buy a luxury item. It's beautiful, shiny, everyone seems to want it. But before you buy it, ask, why do I want this? Is it utility or vanity? Would I still want it if no one else could see it? That last question is one of the most powerful Stoic filters. If you take away the audience, does the desire still exist? If not, it was never about the object. It was about validation. A Stoic spends not based on trends, but on truth. Not on desire, but on discernment. He sees beyond the marketing, the hype, the fear of missing out. He understands that many things are sold to you based on insecurity, to make you feel better, bigger, more worthy. But your worth was never up for sale. It can't be bought, only realized. Let's look at some modern examples. You buy an expensive phone, not because the old one failed, but because you want to signal success. You lease a luxury car, not because it takes you further, but because it makes you feel superior. You purchase designer clothes, not because they last longer, but because they make you feel seen. The Stoic would ask, at what cost? And not just the financial cost, but the cost to your integrity, your clarity, your freedom. It's about 12 Stoic principles that will transform your relationship with money forever. No fluff, no hype, just clarity, courage, and calm. Let's begin. 1. Wealth is not how much you have, but how little you need. The Stoic definition of richness. What does it mean to be truly rich? Most people would point to a bank account, a luxury car, a big house, or a high-paying job. They would say, "He's rich," when they see someone dripping in designer clothes or vacationing in a private jet. If you're working overtime to afford things you don't need, just to impress people who don't matter, then your price is high, but your value is low. You've confused the outer shell with the inner core. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wore robes and slept on straw mats when he could have lived in gold. Why? Because he wanted to remain close to truth. He knew that comfort becomes weakness when it replaces meaning. That if you value appearances too highly, you forget to polish your soul. Here's a Stoic exercise to practice. Walk through your home and ask, what here adds genuine value to my life? Look at your spending and ask, what did I buy to impress versus what I bought to grow? And every time you're about to spend money, pause and ask, am I paying in dollars or in fragments of my peace? Because you are always paying with something. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's attention, identity, or energy. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your life on things that look rich and make you feel poor. The Stoic invests where the return is real, not in things that rust, fade, or go out of style, but in experiences, wisdom, strength, and clarity. He buys books that sharpen his mind, not gadgets that dull his focus. He pays for simplicity, not chaos. He chooses solitude over status, because value is not about how much something costs. It's about how much it serves the soul. So remember this, price is noise, value is signal. Price can deceive, value always reveals. And your job, as a modern Stoic, is not to reject money, but to see clearly, to use money as a tool of purpose, not ego, to understand that the most expensive things in life are not the ones with the highest price, but the ones that steal your clarity, your peace, your freedom, without you even noticing. Choose value, not price. That is the Stoic path. 3. Don't spend emotionally, decide rationally. The Stoic practice of financial self-mastery. Every person has stood in front of a checkout screen, a sales rack, or an open tab on their phone and thought, maybe I deserve this. Or maybe it sounded like, this will make me feel better. Or, I've had a hard week. And then, you bought it. Not because you needed it. Not because it aligned with your goals, but because your emotions were driving the decision. Welcome to the modern battlefield of money, where purchases are rarely rational, and emotions wear the mask of logic. The Stoics understood this problem centuries ago, and their solution? Simple, clear, disciplined. Let reason lead. Let emotion wait. Epictetus, whose teachings focused on control of the self, said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." But what would he say about how we spend? He'd say that you didn't need that overpriced gadget. You needed clarity. You didn't need that impulsive shopping spree. You needed connection, or maybe rest. You didn't need that expensive night out. You needed stillness, or perhaps just sleep. But because you didn't pause, because you didn't examine the emotion, because you let the feeling rush ahead of the thought, you paid the price. And not just in money. You paid with guilt. You paid with stress. You paid with distance from your own values. The Stoic doesn't suppress emotion. He studies it. He doesn't shame himself for feeling. He challenges the feeling with reflection. He lets the urge rise, but does not act until judgment has cleared the air. This is crucial in personal finance, because in the modern world, money is emotional by design. Think of how advertising works. You're not just shown a product. You're shown a version of yourself. Happier, more beautiful, more powerful, more admired, if only you buy. And you believe it, even if just a little. Because deep down, everyone has insecurities. Everyone has emotional wounds that whisper, "This will make you feel whole." But Stoicism teaches you this truth. no purchase can heal what philosophy must address. So how do you apply this? Start with what the Stoics loved, the pause. When you feel that urge to spend, don't obey it immediately. Pause. Ask, what am I feeling right now? Is this spending based on emotion or principle? Will I still want this tomorrow, next week, or in a month? Use time as a filter. Delay decisions. Most emotional spending loses its grip after a night's sleep. What once felt like a solution now looks like clutter. What felt urgent now feels irrelevant. That is the power of reason at work. Another Stoic practice is daily reflection. Seneca wrote letters to himself, but the Stoics would pause and ask, is that person truly rich, or simply drowning in possessions? The Stoics had a radically different definition of wealth. For them, being wealthy wasn't about accumulation, it was about independence. Not the kind that comes from millions in the bank, but the kind that comes from needing less. He examined his day, his behavior, his choices. Do the same with your spending. Each night, ask, did I buy something today out of emotion? What was I trying to avoid or soothe? What could I have done instead? The point is not to shame yourself, it's to see yourself. Because once you become aware of your patterns, they begin to lose their power. Here's a truth the Stoics would have carved in stone. Impulse is weakness in disguise. It promises pleasure, but delivers chaos. It looks like freedom, but always ends in chains. Rational spending, on the other hand, is quiet. It's deliberate. It respects your future self. It aligns with your values. And above all, it keeps your soul at peace. That's the Stoic standard. You might ask, but don't I deserve joy, fun, comfort? Yes, of course. But joy is not found in obeying every urge. It's found in knowing that you are the master, not the servant, of your desires. Spending rationally doesn't mean being cheap. It means being conscious. It means understanding that every dollar you spend is a vote for who you want to become, for what kind of life you're building, for what truly matters. If you let your emotions run your finances, you will always be at the mercy of the day's mood, the advertisement's trick, the social comparison's poison. But if you lead with reason, with clarity, with philosophy, then every purchase becomes an act of alignment, every decision a reflection of your strength. So next time you feel the urge to spend from emotion, don't fight it. Observe it, name it, wait, and then decide. Because the greatest wealth isn't in your wallet, it's in your ability to choose wisely, even when your emotions scream otherwise. And that, the Stoics would say, is the mark of someone truly rich. 4. Protect your peace before your status, the Stoic art of choosing serenity over social performance. We live in a world where status is everything. People buy what they cannot afford, just to appear as though they can. They stretch their budgets, max out their cards, and drown in quiet anxiety, all for a moment of external approval. The car that impresses strangers on the street, the vacation post that earns hundreds of likes, the watch that says, "I've made it." But underneath, many of those people are restless, anxious, and living paycheck to paycheck. The Stoics saw this behavior not just as foolish, but as dangerous. Why? Because when your life is dictated by the need to be seen, you are no longer living according to reason, you are living according to others' expectations. Epictetus warned clearly, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, the price of living a wise and peaceful life is letting go of the desire to impress. This principle is especially important when it comes to money. Every financial decision you make is either building your peace or threatening it. Every time you spend beyond your means, not because you need to, but because you want to maintain an image, what you are doing is trading serenity for show. The Stoic does not do this. The Stoic protects peace above all else, because peace is the soil from which every other virtue grows. Without peace, you cannot think clearly, you You cannot act with patience, or reflect with depth, or live with presence. So the Stoic mindset asks one crucial question: does this cost my peace? And if the answer is yes, the answer is no. Consider your most recent large purchase. Was it aligned with your values, your plans, your real needs? Or was it driven by comparison, by image, by ego? Did it make you feel more yourself or less? Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world in his time, constantly reminded himself to live plainly, to detach from appearances, and to seek stillness over splendor. He could have worn robes embroidered in gold, surrounded himself with luxury, but he chose humility because he understood what so many forget. Peace is not found in more, it is found in enough. And status, if pursued blindly, will cost you more than money. It will cost you freedom. In modern society, many live under constant stress, not because they are truly poor, but because they are trying to appear rich. They buy things to impress people they don't even like. They live in homes that are too expensive, drive cars that require loans, attend dinners they can't afford, and carry smiles that are secretly exhausted. This is not strength. This is slavery. A quiet, elegant slavery that looks beautiful on the outside, but bleeds the soul on the inside. The Stoic would rather wear a simple coat and walk with calm than wear a designer suit and lose sleep over the payment. The Stoic understands that real dignity comes from integrity, not presentation. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers in history, once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This simple line destroys modern consumer logic. In a culture obsessed with more, better, faster, the Stoic quietly rebels. That true power is in living on your own terms, not in winning the approval of the crowd. Seneca put it plainly, "We are not harmed by the things themselves, but by our opinions about them." And nowhere is this more true than in how we perceive status. You are not harmed by owning less. You are harmed by thinking it makes you less. So how do you live this principle? First, begin by identifying your emotional triggers. What situations push you to spend for status? Social gatherings, envy, social media, the feeling of falling behind. Once you know them, pause the next time they arise and ask yourself, what am I really seeking right now? Acceptance or authenticity? The Stoic always chooses authenticity, even when it means walking alone, even when it means being misunderstood, because he knows that the approval of the crowd is fleeting, but the approval of his own conscience is eternal. Second, audit your lifestyle. Are you living for comfort or for show? Is your rent aligned with your income? Are your habits rooted in your own taste, or are they borrowed from someone else's expectations? Go through your expenses one by one and ask, does this nourish my peace, or does it perform for someone else? Be honest. You don't need to eliminate all luxury, but you do need to make sure that what you keep is chosen, not imposed. Finally, practice contentment, not as resignation, but as power. The Stoic is not complacent. He is strategic. He doesn't deny the value of ambition or success, but he knows that success without peace is just noise. So he chooses a quieter path, one of balance, of reflection, of meaning. He trains himself to find joy in simplicity, to be satisfied with the basics, to own less and owe nothing. Because in the end, what makes you rich is not what others see. It's how deeply you sleep at night. Not how loud your lifestyle is, but how calm your soul feels. And if you have to sacrifice that peace to maintain your image, then you are losing the most important thing you have. So remember this, the next time you feel the pressure to spend to impress, the temptation to show what you have, the fear of looking less than, breathe. Step back and ask, does this cost my peace? If it does, the Stoic answer is always no. 5. Master your financial habits, or they will master you. The Stoic discipline of small daily control. You don't need a financial disaster to ruin your life. Most people are not broken by one huge mistake, but by 1,000 small ones, repeated day after day without reflection. One unnecessary subscription here, one impulse purchase there, one lunch out that turns into 5. A pattern of small leaks. And then, slowly but surely, the ship begins to sink. The Stoics were not just concerned with philosophy as lofty ideas, they were obsessed with practice, with daily behavior, with repetition, because they understood that your life is not shaped by what you believe. It's shaped by what you do consistently. In the words of Epictetus, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Your financial life is the perfect place to apply this. You don't rise or fall by how much you dream or how much you read about budgeting. You rise or fall based on the habits you've trained, your spending rituals, your saving reflexes, your day-to-day decisions. And if you do not take ownership of these, they will take ownership of you. We often think of money in terms of income, how much we earn, how much we make. But the Stoic would say, what matters just as much, if not more, is how we handle what we have. Are we wasteful or wise? Do we act with discipline or drift in indulgence? Do we track and evaluate or ignore and hope? Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." But craving doesn't just show up in big purchases. It hides in the everyday, the routine, the unconscious. Every time you click buy now, without thinking, you are feeding the craving. Every time you say just this once, you are deepening the rut of impulsive behavior. And every time you ignore your bank statement, because it's probably fine, you're handing your power over to chaos. The Stoic doesn't wait for pain to make a change. He trains himself in advance. He builds the muscle of awareness through small, daily choices. This is how you build financial self-mastery, not in one grand gesture, but in 1,000 moments of quiet control. Start simple. Begin with awareness. Track everything you spend for a week, not to punish yourself, but to observe. While others chase financial milestones, the Stoic asks a deeper question. How much do I truly need to be content? If you measure wealth by how little you need to be at peace, then even a modest income can make you rich. And if you constantly crave more status, more gadgets, more luxury, then even millions can leave you feeling empty. Wealth, to the Stoic, is inner sufficiency. It is the ability to look at what you have and say, this is enough. You cannot master what you do not measure. The Stoic believes in clear vision. If you don't know where your money is going, how can you possibly command it? Next, audit your habits. Ask yourself, what are my most frequent expenses? Which ones are driven by genuine need, and which by boredom, fear, or ego? What time of day am I most prone to impulse buying? What emotional state triggers me to spend unnecessarily? You are not just a financial being. You are an emotional one, and until you understand how your feelings hijack your habits, you will continue to lose money without knowing why. Now, design your system. The Stoic builds structure into his life not because he is rigid, but because he wants to be free. He knows that freedom is not the absence of rules, it's the presence of self-direction. So create rituals that protect you. A weekly review of your bank account, a daily limit on discretionary spending, a monthly reflection on which expenses brought peace and which brought regret. A rule: no emotional purchases allowed until 24 hours have passed. Each of these is a wall protecting your peace, a defense against the enemy within, your untrained habits. Because the truth is simple, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And if your systems are weak, your finances will reflect it. The Stoic is a builder. He lays the foundation brick by brick, not tomorrow, but today, not someday, but now. He treats every dollar as a vote, for virtue or for vice, for growth or for indulgence, for control or for chaos. And when he slips, he does not despair. He reflects, learns, adjusts, begins again, because discipline is not perfection. It is persistence, a path walked with attention, patience, and humility. So what does it mean to master your financial habits? It means no longer living in reaction, no longer spending as a way to soothe, escape, or impress. It means creating a rhythm that aligns with who you want to become. It means training your behavior until it becomes character. It means being the kind of person who doesn't need to be told what to do, because they already know. Your money doesn't need a miracle. It needs you, calm, present, disciplined. It needs you to be a craftsman, not a gambler, a strategist, not a victim. Because if you don't master your habits, they will master you. And if they do, you won't just lose money. You'll lose time, clarity, purpose, and eventually yourself. But if you take this moment, today, to step onto the path of discipline, then you've already won. And that, the Stoics would say, is wealth that cannot be stolen. 6. Stop buying approval with money. The Stoic way to break free from social comparison. There is a silent trap that ruins more financial lives than any recession ever could. It hides behind ordinary purchases and common decisions. It looks like success, but it smells like fear. That trap is the need to prove yourself through what you own, the need to buy approval. You see it every day. The person who leases the car they can't afford, not because they need it, but because of what they want it to say. The one who spends half their paycheck on clothes, not for comfort, but for status. The endless chase to show you're doing well, that you've made it, that you matter. But what the Stoic knows, and what most ignore, is this: any worth that depends on the validation of others is a debt you'll never finish paying. Seneca warned us long ago. What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears. And in modern terms, part of what calls for tears is how often we trade peace for perception. People are financially drowning just to look like they're swimming. And when you start living for approval, you stop living for yourself. The Stoic doesn't play that game. He doesn't need your applause, because he's already got his own self-respect. He doesn't dress to impress the crowd. He dresses to match his conscience. He doesn't spend to compete. He spends to align with his values. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because doing what's wise often looks strange in a world addicted to appearances. If you need people to see your success in order to believe in it yourself, then your sense of identity is built on sand. Not because you've settled, but because you've awakened, because you've realized that chasing endlessly only leads to anxiety, debt, and disconnection from yourself. Now let's talk practically. Everywhere you go, you're bombarded with messages that tell you you're not enough. You need the next upgrade, the next thing, the next success marker. This is how the economy runs, not on need, but on dissatisfaction. But if you can walk into a room knowing exactly who you are, regardless of what you're wearing, driving, or posting, then no one can take your confidence from you. That is the Stoic definition of real wealth. Think back to your last unnecessary purchase. Ask yourself honestly, who was I trying to impress? Would I have bought this if no one would ever see it? Was this about utility or insecurity? You don't have to answer out loud. Just be honest. That's where the shift begins. Now look at your habits. Do you find yourself scrolling through social media, comparing your life to filtered highlight reels? Do you feel behind because someone else posted a vacation, an outfit, a car? That's the emotional virus of our time. comparison as identity. And what's the cure? Philosophy, not theory, but practice. Not quotes, but action. The Stoic doesn't envy the rich. He questions what they gave up to get there. He doesn't resent the successful. He redefines what success means. He doesn't chase after what glitters. He chooses what grounds. To break free from buying approval, begin with detachment. Remind yourself daily. You don't need to be seen to be valid. You don't need to be liked to be whole. You are not your possessions. You are not your followers. You are not your income. You are your choices, your discipline, your integrity. And when you embrace that, you begin to spend differently. You stop using your money to build a mask. You start using it to build a life that is quiet but powerful, simple but stable, one that looks unremarkable on the outside, but feels unshakable on the inside. Here's a challenge. Go a full week without buying anything just to impress. When the urge comes, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, who is this for? If the answer is anyone but your rational self, let it go. You may feel strange at first, disconnected, even scared. But then something amazing happens. You start to feel free. Free from the need to perform. Free from the fear of judgment. Free from the game of trying to keep up with people who aren't even paying attention. Because the truth is, the people you're trying to impress, they're trying to impress someone else too. And no one's really watching. Everyone's too busy with their own act. The Stoic refuses to live that way. He builds from the inside out. He lets go of image so he can hold on to peace. He knows that when you stop buying approval, you start building identity. And that kind of wealth, no one can give it to you, and no one can take it away. 7. Practice premeditatio paupertatis. Imagine poverty to destroy the fear of it. There is a silent fear that haunts almost everyone, whether rich or poor. It hides behind our hustle, our ambition, our savings plans, our investments. It whispers in the background every time we swipe a card, check a bank app, or wonder if we're doing enough. That fear is simple, primal, and deeply human. The fear of losing everything. The Stoics didn't run from this fear. They stared it down, they studied it, and then they practiced for it, literally. They trained their minds, and sometimes their bodies, to become familiar with loss before it happened. The practice was called premeditatio paupertatis, the premeditation of poverty. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men of his time, would regularly wear rough clothes, eat plain food, and sleep on the floor. Why? Not because he had to, but because he chose to remind himself that if it all disappeared tomorrow, he would still be him. He wrote, "Set aside a few days each month, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest of fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself, is this the condition that I feared?" Let that question echo inside you. Is this the condition that I feared? In the Stoic view, it is not loss itself that destroys people. It is the shock of loss, the surprise, the emotional collapse when things don't go according to plan. But if you've already rehearsed hardship in your mind, it cannot destroy you. This isn't about pessimism, it's about preparation. It's not about inviting pain, it's about building the inner strength to face it when it comes. Imagine, right now, losing your job, losing your investments, losing your comforts, losing your lifestyle. What would be left? If the answer is, I don't know who I'd be, then you've built your identity too much on the external. But what happens when you stop playing that game? What happens when you train yourself, like a Stoic, to be content with less? You become unshakable. You stop living paycheck to paycheck, not because you suddenly earn 10 times more, but because you stop wasting money trying to fill emotional holes. You stop competing with others, not because you don't care, but because you no longer use consumption as a scoreboard. 1. You start to sleep better, think clearer, make sharper decisions. The Stoic believes you should be able to lose everything and still remain yourself. This practice is liberating. When you've imagined life with less, truly sat with it, walked with it, tasted it, it stops scaring you. And when it stops scaring you, you make better financial decisions. You stop chasing money like a lifeline. You stop clinging to luxuries as if your sanity depended on them. You stop overreacting to losses or obsessing over gains, because you've trained yourself to understand that your true wealth is not what you own, but what you can endure without losing your center. How can you apply this? First, in the mind. Take a few minutes each day to visualize a worst-case financial scenario. Not to panic, but to examine your resilience. Ask yourself, if I had to live with only the essentials, how would I manage? If I lost access to my comforts, what habits would I rely on? Could I still keep my principles, my peace, my focus? This isn't a game of masochism. This is mental strength training. And every rep you do makes you more anti-fragile. Second, in the body, try fasting for a day. Try walking instead of driving. Try sleeping without the perfect bed, or spending a day in plain clothes, or living for a weekend on just a few dollars. Again, not to punish, but to remind yourself, this is not the end of me. This is survivable. This is manageable. And once you've seen that you can live without, really live, your desperation to always have more begins to fade. That's where the real wealth begins. Not in hoarding money, but in destroying the neediness that surrounds it. Because if you can handle loss, mentally and physically, you become powerful. You become hard to manipulate, hard to tempt, hard to break. Most people walk through life terrified of the bottom, but the Stoic walks through life knowing he's already been there, in practice. And when you know you can handle the fall, you stop living with fear. You start living with strategy. This is why Stoics are calm in chaos, why they don't panic during recessions, why they don't envy the rich or pity the poor, because they know what actually matters cannot be stolen by markets, layoffs, or accidents. It's your mindset, your strength, your values, your discipline, your ability to get up when life knocks you flat. Premeditatio, paupertatis, is not about fantasizing worst-case scenarios for the sake of suffering. It's about building unshakable inner infrastructure so that when hardship knocks, you don't shatter. When others are paralyzed by fear of losing their money, the Stoic moves with calm. He already walked that road, in his mind, in his training, in his reflection. So if he ever walks it in real life, he walks it with strength. That is Stoic financial freedom. Not to never lose, but to lose and remain unbroken. 8. Invest in what never loses value. Character, knowledge, discipline. In every economy, the markets rise and fall. Stocks go up. Currencies crash. Real estate bubbles burst. Fortunes are made and lost overnight. People chase trends, build portfolios, follow the next big thing, only to discover that what seemed secure can vanish in a blink. But there's one truth the Stoics never forgot. Even centuries before the first bank ever existed, the most valuable assets are the ones no one can steal from you. Seneca wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." The message, if your wealth is purely external, you're always one misstep away from collapse. But if your investment is internal, if it's in your character, knowledge, and discipline, then you are rich in the only currency that matters when the world burns. Let's break this down. Character is your moral foundation. It's who you are when no one's watching. In a world obsessed with performance and image, character is the quiet engine of integrity. It doesn't show up on your tax return, but it determines how you handle everything from contracts to temptations to betrayal. A person with money, but no character, is a danger to themselves and others. But a person with character can navigate both poverty and prosperity without losing themselves. The Stoic doesn't just save money, he saves himself. With every honest decision, every moment of restraint, every courageous act of virtue, he builds invisible wealth that no market crash can erase. Knowledge is your compass. You can lose a job, but no one can take your mind. You stop making purchases from stress, boredom, or insecurity. You buy only what adds value. You spend intentionally. You value your money not for what it can buy, but for the freedom it gives you when you don't waste it. Imagine a person who earns a modest salary but has no debt, lives simply, saves diligently, and has time to think, reflect, read, and grow. Then imagine someone who earns 10 times more, but is overworked, drowning in expenses, and constantly chasing more to feel valid. You can lose your business, but if you've cultivated understanding, you'll know how to rebuild. The Stoics were scholars, not for vanity, but for survival. They studied nature, logic, ethics, and human behavior because they knew that in the unpredictability of life, only wisdom keeps you grounded. The more you know, the less you fear. The more you learn, the less you depend. Every book you read, every skill you sharpen, every reflection you write is an investment in mental capital that appreciates over time. And unlike money, it cannot be stolen, only forgotten. Discipline is the bridge between your values and your behavior. It is the daily act of honoring what you claim to believe. And without it, both character and knowledge collapse. Discipline is saying no when everything in you wants to say yes. It is the habit of sticking to your budget, following your plan, resisting the shiny distraction. In the words of Epictetus, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And what lies within your control, always, is your ability to show up with intention, even when you don't feel like it. Discipline is what turns good intentions into actual results. These three, character, knowledge, and discipline, are not exciting on paper. They don't get headlines, they don't show off, but they are the bedrock of indestructible wealth. Not flashy, but foundational. Not loud, but unshakable. Let's contrast this with how most people treat their money. They buy a new gadget instead of reading a book. They upgrade their lifestyle instead of upgrading their mindset. They follow influencers instead of following principles. And then they wonder why. When things go wrong, they feel lost. The Stoic doesn't just prepare for wealth, he prepares for setbacks. He knows that anything external can vanish, so he pours himself into what lasts. Here's a simple practice. Each month, when you sit down to review your finances, also review your inner portfolio. Ask yourself, what part of my character did I strengthen this month? What did I learn that made me wiser, calmer, more capable? Where did I apply discipline despite difficulty? This is your real return on investment. You could double your income tomorrow, but if you don't have the discipline to manage it, you'll be in the same chaos within a year. You could inherit wealth, but if you lack character, you'll waste it in the pursuit of ego. You could surround yourself with tools, but if you've built no knowledge, you won't know how to use them. Meanwhile, someone with modest means, but who has trained their mind, tempered their heart, and sharpened their habits, will thrive in any situation. Why? Because they have built the core. The Stoic understands external success is unstable if it's not supported by internal structure. So yes, invest in your future, but don't just invest in stocks. Invest in silence, in reflection, in mastery. Spend less time on your shopping cart and more time on your character. Spend less energy on impressing others and more on understanding yourself. Because when the market crashes, the storm hits, or the job ends, you'll still have you. And if you are strong, centered, trained, then you will rise again. That is Stoic wealth. That is the investment that pays you back every day and never, ever goes out of style. 9. Avoid debt. Born from ego, the hidden slavery. You choose debt in itself is not evil. There are debts that arise from real needs, medical emergencies, unexpected life changes, the pursuit of education, survival during hardship. These debts are rooted in reality. But then, there is another kind of debt, a debt more dangerous because it's voluntary, a debt that comes not from necessity, but from the need to appear. This is the debt born from ego, and it is a silent form of self-imprisonment. The Stoics would call this kind of debt exactly what it is, a self-chosen chain. Seneca, one of the richest Stoics to ever live, warned constantly against the illusions of wealth. He wrote, "A great fortune is a great slavery," but what he really meant was this: fortune becomes slavery when it owns you, when you no longer control your desires, but instead live to satisfy them at any cost. In the modern world, debt is easier to enter than ever. A click, a swipe, a signature, and suddenly, you're no longer free. Because debt is not just a number, it is an obligation to the past. Every time you say yes to something you can't afford in the moment, you are binding your future self to serve the whims of your past self. That's not financial strategy. That's philosophical blindness. Who is richer? The Stoics would say, the one who is in control of his desires. And this is key. Wealth, in Stoic terms, is not an amount, it's a relationship. It's the relationship between what you have and what you think you need. If what you have exceeds what you need, you're free. If what you need exceeds what you have, you're trapped. That's why Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, surrounded by immense luxury, still reminded himself to live simply, to eat humbly, to sleep with gratitude. Ego debt looks different for everyone. It might be the luxury car that turns heads, the designer handbag that signals status, the apartment that's in the right neighborhood, even if it swallows half your income. These things aren't evil, but when purchased to impress, they become a cost, not just to your wallet, but to your peace. Why do we fall into this trap? Because we confuse visibility with value, because we measure our worth against others instead of against our principles, because we fear seeming less than, because we think being respected requires looking successful. But the Stoic asks, respected by whom and for what? If people only respect you because of your car, your clothes, your address, then they are not respecting you. They are respecting the mask you wear. And if you borrow to maintain that mask, then not only are you lying to others, you're lying to yourself. And nothing corrodes the soul faster than self-deception. To the Stoic, honesty is freedom. Honesty about what you can afford, about what truly matters, about how little you actually need to live with dignity. The solution isn't shame, it's clarity. You don't have to feel guilt for past decisions, but you must reflect on what those decisions cost you. Ask yourself, how much of my debt exists because I was trying to look a certain way? What am I really paying for? Utility or identity? Who am I trying to impress, and do they even care? Let's be blunt. The people you fear being judged by, most of them are not paying attention, and the ones who are, they have their own hidden debts, their own insecurities. So why destroy your freedom for their fleeting opinion? The Stoic refuses to be a slave to that. He would rather wear simple clothes and walk freely than dress in luxury and walk in chains. He would rather live in a modest home with clarity than in a mansion full of anxiety, because he knows freedom is not living like the rich. Freedom is not owing anything to anyone, especially your ego. If you're already in debt, the Stoic path is not to panic, but to reclaim sovereignty, step by step, with discipline. Start living under your means. Sell what does not serve your peace. Pay what you owe, not just with money, but with intention. And most of all, stop creating new chains. Every time you say no to ego spending, you say yes to your future. Every time you reject a fake upgrade, you upgrade your character. Every time you walk away from a status symbol, you walk closer to inner stillness. Because here's the truth. Debt from ego is loud at first, and then becomes silent torture. Freedom from ego is hard at first, and then becomes quiet peace. And peace is what the Stoic seeks above all, not because he is afraid of wealth, but because he refuses to be owned by anything, especially his own image. So when you're tempted to impress, to prove, to show off, pause. Remember, the person you are is not defined by what you buy. It's defined by what you can walk away from without losing yourself. And that kind of wealth, it never needs to be financed. It just needs to be remembered. 10. Money is a servant, not a master, reclaiming authority over the tool of fortune. Money is powerful, but not in the way most people think. Its power does not come from what it can buy, but from what it can control. And the tragic truth is that, for many, money no longer serves. It commands, it dictates, it dominates. It is no longer a tool. It has become a tyrant. But the Stoic sees through the illusion. For him, money must always be a servant, never a master. The moment you begin shaping your life decisions around money, rather than around your values, your peace, and your reason, you have surrendered your throne. You have placed yourself below the tool you are meant to command. You have allowed gold to become your god. Epictetus warned, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. But even deeper than that, he understood that wealth itself must be put in its place. It is not evil, but it is dangerous when idolized. It is not a poison, but it becomes one when consumed without measure. And the worst kind of slavery is when the man believes he is free because he earns well. Yet all of his time, all of his decisions, all of his thoughts are dictated by one question. What will this cost me? The Stoic asks a better question. Will this bring me closer to virtue or further from it? Here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people are not working for freedom. They are working for money.